how much can I actually spend in retirement? So for a lot of pre-retirees, as they're getting closer to their future desired retirement date, the simple yet critical question they all ask is, how much can I afford to safely spend in retirement? Especially if my retirement is expected to be 30, 35, maybe sometimes 40 years down the road. Nobody wants to run out of money in retirement. Nobody wants to get a part-time job in their 80s because they're forced to. And nobody wants a specific economic circumstance to derail all of the work they've put in to prepare for and save for their retirement. So they want the question of how much can I afford to spend in retirement to be delivered to them with a tremendous amount of confidence, knowing that worst case scenario, they are still going to be okay. These are the type of questions I have with my clients for a living. Hello, my name is Derek Delaney. I'm a certified financial planner. And in this video, we're going to talk about a case study to dive a little bit deeper into trying to determine how much you can afford to spend in retirement. So let's talk about it. Let's assume that you're 58 years old. You haven't reached the magic age of 59 and a half, but you're just getting sick of working. You've worked your entire life. You don't have a very expensive lifestyle. And now you're 58 years old and you've saved $1.5 million for yourself in retirement. And you are asking the common question everybody asks, which is, how much can I afford to spend in retirement? Well, first, let's make a few critical assumptions we're going to need to talk about before we can answer that question. And the first critical assumption we're going to use is, how long do we think you're going to live in retirement? Well, if we go by average actuarial tables, there is a high probability that a married couple, and in this situation, we're talking about a married couple, both retiring at 58, there is a high probability that either one or both will live into their 90s. So we will assume that this 58-year-old couple with $1.5 million is going to live to their mid-90s, which 95 years old. That means they have a 37-year retirement period ahead of them that we need to plan for and that we need to make sure their $1.5 million will cover throughout that 37-year period. The next thing we're going to make an assumption on is what kind of money they have saved. Well, we'll assume in this situation that they have saved the majority of their money in tax-deferred accounts, which is a 401k and a 403b. To be more specific, we will assume that 92% of their retirement savings are in these tax-deferred accounts, which means that at some point in the future, when they pull that money out, they will be taxed on those dollars at whatever tax rates they find themselves in at that specific point in the future. The other 8% we'll assume are in taxable accounts, bank accounts, and taxable investment accounts of the 1.5 million. The next critical assumption we're going to make is that these 58-year-olds have done a wonderful job of eliminating all debt. They don't have mortgage debt. They don't carry credit card debt. Every once in a while, they will buy a newer vehicle and upgrade, but they're able to use the equity in their old vehicles and a little bit of cash on hand to pay for that. So they don't have a lot of vehicle debt moving forward either. And we'll assume that they're relatively healthy. So they will need some sort of healthcare plan, but that's going to be built into the how much can I afford to spend. So understanding all of that information, and then one more critical detail that we're going to apply as far as an assumption to this situation is that this 58-year-old couple has no long-term legacy goals. So they want to spend every dollar they have saved, and they want their last check to bounce by the time they hit their 95th birthday, which is the year they're expected to pass away. So they have no legacy goals for any sort of beneficiary or anything like that at this moment. So understanding all of that, what is the magical amount that they are able to spend after tax in retirement, starting the year they decide to retire, which is this year at the age of 58? Well, before we get into that number, it's important to note that there are a number of different ways to calculate this. And one common way people use to figure this number out, their how much can I afford to spend in retirement number, is by using the 4% rule. Now, the 4% rule was created a long time ago, and it was meant to provide people within a simple context to give them an idea of what they can safely afford to spend in retirement. So if we look at a $1.5 million portfolio and we apply the 4% rule with this couple, It means that they're going to be able to pull or withdraw $60,000 out of their portfolio every single year in retirement. So if they wanted to play it safe, they would have to create a lifestyle that they'd be able to comfortably live off of $60,000 a year, plus pay the tax required based off of that 60, because 4% of 1.5 is 60 being withdrawn out of their portfolio. They have to take some of that and spend toward taxes as well. Now, a lot of people with $1.5 million might be thinking to themselves, there's no way I can create a lifestyle that I want and desire based off of $60,000 a year at age 58. I need to spend more. I want to spend more. There's way more I want to accomplish in retirement. And if that's the case, the only solution you have if you wanted to build your retirement off of that 4% rule is to continue to work, because you don't have enough retirement savings based off of that 4% calculation to withdraw any more than $60,000 a year. And the only way to save more is to continue to work more, to shorten your retirement period, and to increase the amount of savings you can safely withdraw 4% off. So that is the downside of using a simplified calculation like the 4% rule, is there is a high probability that you will underspend what you have the ability to spend in retirement, which is going to cause you to delay gratification, do less than you want to in retirement, or it's going to force you to work longer to save more to hit that 4% calculation number that you need to live off of in retirement based off of the lifestyle you have envisioned for yourself. Not great. So what is the alternative? Well, the alternative is what we're going to talk about and how I derive the what can I spend number for all of my clients. And that's based off of a dynamic withdrawal strategy. So a dynamic withdrawal strategy does not assume that you're going to spend a specific amount of money, which is the same every single year over a 37-year retirement period. The first big difference is we're going to assume that your spending is going to be age-based, meaning that you're probably going to want and need to spend more while you're younger and healthier in the early years of retirement. And as you get older and life slows down, you're going to naturally spend less. So we can build that into the calculation, which is going to allow you to spend more earlier in retirement and throughout retirement than that 4% rule. The other thing we're going to factor in is that we believe you're going to get Social Security at full retirement age. So once that Social Security kicks in, it's going to force you to have to withdraw less from your retirement portfolios at about $70,000 clip per year is what we're assuming for Social Security, which means we can afford to spend a bigger distribution withdrawal percentage out of your portfolio earlier in retirement, because we know that that higher withdrawal percentage, probably much higher than 4%, is going to be temporary. And as you get older, the need for income is going to drop because you're going to be spending less. And at full retirement age, which is 67, your Social Security is going to get kicked in. So this dynamic withdrawal strategy understands that we're going to spend less and more income is going to show up as you get older, meaning we have the ability to spend more and at a higher percentage of your overall portfolio earlier in retirement. The next big piece of the puzzle when it comes to this dynamic withdrawal strategy that is different than the 4% rule is we're going to apply guardrails. And these guardrails say that if the risk of overspending becomes too great, meaning we experience some sort of economic collapse, a catastrophe like 2008, 2009, and investment markets tank, we're going to have guardrails in place that say if your portfolio drops to X amount, we are going to temporarily reduce your spending, tighten your belt for, again, a temporary period of time until economic conditions recover again, and then we will naturally increase your spending back up to the original amount you were spending before that income cut kicked in. The reason we utilize this spending guardrail is that we know if we're able to cut our spending when we have to, and we know what amount we have to cut our spending by, it's going to provide us with a way to ensure the rest of retirement is viable without having to cut spending down the road or completely blow up the investment portfolio or having to go back to work. And that is a huge benefit to the dynamic withdrawal strategy compared to the 4% rule. Is every retiree superpower is their ability to cut temporarily the amount of money they spend in any given year when it's required because of some economic catastrophe or large expense that is unseen at some point in your future retirement. And if you're able to temporarily cut your spending because you don't have a lot of debt and you don't have a lot of other requirements environments that force you to spend your money, you can temporarily cut your spending with hopefully relative ease during poor economic periods, which is going to allow the rest of your retirement to remain viable. And with that strategy in place and that guardrail set, it's providing you with the ability to actually spend more earlier in retirement while economic conditions are good. So with all that being said, you're 58 years old, you want to spend, you have $1.5 million of retirement assets to spend. We think by the time you get to age 67, both of you are going to have roughly combined in present value terms about $70,000 a year in Social Security. And we know that we're going to spend in your retirement based off of an age-based pattern. So more early, less as you get older, and then very little as you age into your 90s because your life is really slowing down. And we also assume that we're going to be able to put guardrails in place. So if the risk of overspending because of circumstances we don't foresee today actually take place, we're going to be able to cut your spending temporarily to get you back on track. All complete, all tools that we aren't able to use just sheerly using the 4% withdrawal rate. So all of that being said, what is the magic number you're going to be able to spend given this financial situation year one in retirement at age 58 with $1.5 million in a portfolio ready to utilize in retirement? The answer to that is roughly after tax about $85,000 a year one in retirement, which is $25,000 more than the 4% rule. And that 4% rule, remember, has not factored in after tax. So if we factored in after tax in that 4% rule, that'd be probably closer to $52,000, $53,000 a year. And we're over here spending $85,000 a year in retirement because we're using the dynamic withdrawal strategy instead of that 4% basic calculation. So if you find yourself getting closer to retirement and that itch of retirement continues to grow, but you don't feel you have enough money because there's no way you can fund the lifestyle you want for yourself in retirement based off of those simple calculations you've used in the past, like the 4% rule, chances are, or the good news is, that you are probably underestimating what you have the ability to spend, in that implementing a more holistic retirement income strategy, like a dynamic withdrawal strategy, and implementing those other tools in place like guardrails and age-based spending calculations could, in a very significant way, increase with a high level of confidence the amount of money you have the ability to spend in retirement based off of that 4% rule. Now, the last question you might have is, Derek, well, if I spent $85,000 a year, what is the probability that I overspend in retirement compared to the probability that I underspend in retirement? And this is a common question that a lot of people ask based off of the Monte Carlo simulations that are run typically when financial advisors, financial planners try to forecast the viability of somebody's future retirement. This $85,000 net of taxes number is based off of a 75-25% overspend, underspend calculation via those Monte Carlo simulations, meaning 75% of the time you actually have more money than you think you're going to want at the end of retirement. And 25% of the time, you end up not having enough money before you get to the end of retirement. And the 75-25% calculations are based off of all the different rates of return, inflation, and mortality sequences you could run into in retirement. So based off of all of that, that $85,000 a year number via the dynamic withdrawal strategy we have set up for this hypothetical retiree couple results in 75% of the time they make it to the end of retirement with more money than they think they want, and 25% of the time they don't make it to the end of the retirement without running out of money. Based off of all those different simulations and those different rates of return, inflation, and mortality assumptions that we could switch around via those different simulations, which is a great sign because 75-25, in my opinion, in a lot of financial planning / retirement planning, academic output that has been released over the last handful of years, 75%, 25% over underspend ratio is kind of the ideal target that most retirees should base their spending off of, especially if they have those guardrails in place. So if you're watching this and you're like, I have over $1.5 million, or I'm going to have $1.5 million when I'm 58, or when I'm 59, or when I'm in my early 60s, does that mean maybe I can retire earlier than I think? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. But first, you need to have a discussion with a qualified retirement planner, and you need to have a plan that you're very confident in before you pull that retirement trigger, because there may be a lot of assumptions going on in your life that are different than what we talked about today that could increase or decrease your probability of success given your age and retirement nest egg of $1.5 million. So if you want to have that conversation and you want to dig into this a lot deeper with a flat fee retirement planning firm, that is exactly what I do with my firm. And this is exactly the type of work I do with my clients. And if this seems like a conversation you want to have in more depth, I invite you to schedule your complimentary consultation where we could talk about this and more over a 30 to 45-minute Zoom, in-person, or phone conversation. And I can hopefully provide you with more guidance on your chance of success given your financial situation based off of retirement goals you have moving forward. So if that's a conversation you want to have at some point in the future, I highly recommend you click on the link in the video description, schedule your complimentary consultation, and I'd be happy to chat more about all of this in regards to your specific retirement situation. Until that future conversation, my name is Derek Delaney. Happy retirement planning.